Hey guys, it's Marissa here. I'm going to be talking about human design and specifically about the awareness centers. I did the splenic last week. I'm going to be talking about the Ajna Awareness Center and the last awareness center I will do next week, which is the Solar Plexus Awareness Center. So we've started off with the Splenic Awareness Center as a species, and that was all about fear, and so is the ajna and the solar plex, but it's different kinds of fears. But the fear is what drives us as a species because fear is what we need to keep us safe, and it gives us the motivation to try to figure things out. So now in the mind, which in the head center, there is the pineal gland, and it works together with the ajna, which is this awareness center, and the head is a pressure center. So it's a pressure for inspiration that gets filtered and comes through our ajna center as an awareness center. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the physiology of it and how it works, and I'm going to bring in the gates and how um, the fears of the ajna, or actually they're really more anxieties of the ajna, show up for us. So now in the head center, the pineal gland works with the neocortex, and it's in the ajna, and that is very important for our self-reflected consciousness and how we can process what we imagine happens to us. Gland in the head center is like a threshold border, and it's really a big deal, this neocortex, because it's it's the location of our reflective consciousness and how we can identify ourselves in the world and where we are and who we are and have this consistent self and memories and all of that stuff. So it's between the ajna and the mind is like a storage and calculation. Like the mind is storage for all of these memories and experiences, while the ajna is where you process and conceptualize and make sense of and name and measure all of those things. And that's really a huge thing when it comes to, why we're not supposed to listen to our mind, because we tell ourselves all these stories and, on a moment to moment basis. So, mediating between the deep gray experiential storage areas of the brain, which are associated in the head center, and then the more strategic neocortex, which is like a bridge or threshold guard to the pineal gland associated with the head center. So now the pineal gland in the head center operates like a sponge with no liquid, and it's open and it's receptive. And once that has fully absorbed liquid, it literally closes up so that nothing can get through and it's no longer porous. So it can open up and be porous and allow experiences to go through it and be stored, or it can tighten up and let nothing get through. When we sleep, we lose consciousness and the pineal gland closes. So as we take in the world, it goes up into the deep gray areas of the brain through the pineal gland. And our experiences get stored, and then they come back out again as inspiration in the head center. And the pineal gland acting as that border guard allows the information to move from the deep gray areas into the neocortex to be conceptualized. So inspiration is your own experience in the world, which builds up as a pressure in the gray matter, and then it must be released. And the only way that it can be released is through the pineal as a pressure that feeds the ajna and the conceptualizing process. So when the pineal gland is open, it can allow serotonin, which is a special chemical information package, and it allows it to move through the neocortex to the deep gray areas. And this is what allows us to access what's in the deep gray areas. It's basically like our hard drive, to use a computer analogy. And it's how it stores all that information and the way which the information is retrieved are all currently areas of extensive scientific study. But what we do know is that our reflective consciousness in that cortex needs to pull in that gray area contents and give it its shape. Although it's the neocortex that actually gives it the shape. So the brain does not store sentences or thoughts or complete sentences or concepts. It kind of decodes them by stepping down their frequencies through the other centers and the glandular functions of the pituitary's agency, which is very much to do with the Ajna center, which I'm talking about here. So, since 1781, the focus on this whole program has been the Ajna center. Well, we've been in that kind of awareness, but we're moving towards the solar plexus mutation, and that's really when it started in 1781. The days of the Ajna are actually long gone. We're just still, a lot of people are not awake yet, and we're still kind of in it. So the Ajna is about conceptualization. Like I said, it's about measuring, researching, naming things. It's an awareness center where everything gets distorted. And it's a mental conceptualizing field based on vision and glandular coordination. And it's basically a filter with certain built-in limitations. And it really is a very, very remarkable tool for research and communication. But when we don't have the awareness, which most of the people in the world right now don't, which a lot are waking up, which is really good, but um, people tend to think that we make decisions from that, from the mind, which we're measuring and conceptualizing and naming. But it's really about these fears. Like for example, people are using their mind to think about protecting themselves with nuclear weapons and all of these things that can really harm all of humanity. And this is all coming from mind. And it can be a scary thing. And mind is also, it's also the spokesperson for our open centers, for our openness, where we are receptive. So if you have an open ego or an open root, your mind can sound like, the I'm not good enough or I need to prove myself. Like you can hear that in the mind from your open ego, or the pressure of getting things done from the root, or, whatever your uniqueness may be. The mind, no matter what, is always a spokesperson for the not self. Doesn't matter if it's defined or undefined, it's not to be used for making our own decisions. We can absolutely use it for research and measurement, and then let that run through our authority over time. And then we can, it could be a good tool for that, but it's really for outer authority for other people to share your ideas and concepts and to communicate with other people, because it does have that communication function. If you think of the Ajna center, it's the second one down underneath the head center, and it connects. Three channels connect to the head for inspiration, and three channels connect to the throat for communication. So we need to learn how to communicate these facts and concepts and measurements with each other as outer authority. And that is what mind is used for, not for ourselves and our own decision making. Because when we do that, what happens is we start to judge ourselves, and everything just gets very distorted based off of our moment by moment experience that is happening through this glandular coordination and the neocortex and the deep gray areas and all of that. So, yeah, so we wind up lying to ourselves so much, and we don't even realize it because there's so much conditioning built up because of the association with the pituitary glands. Like there's so much openness in the body graph that you can have that reflects back to you, and it adds to the conceptualizing abilities or reflexes or capacities of the conditioned ajna. And the three biological functions of the ajna center, like I said, the pituitaries, the neocortex, and the eyes. And the pituitaries are the anterior and the posterior pituitaries. So another thing is, when the human evolutionary process began with the splenic awareness to keep us alive like 90,000 years ago, we went through this process and it wound up opening up the Ajna Center and its potential during our revolutionary development. And we had several transitions take place that made us different from other mammals. And it was this mutation that developed the human, the neocortex, and its capacity for the self-reflective consciousness and communication of the larynx that allowed humans to communicate at a very sophisticated level. And then we developed more memory to process the information that came with our more sophisticated sound capacity. And this in turn forced more conceptualizing power. And the more you conceptualize, the more you try to figure things out, the more you ruminate, the more you distort. It's so obvious how the mind can really mess us up. So, so biologically, it's related to the pituitary glands, the anterior and the posterior pituitary glands, and they're called the master glands. And those pituitary glands in the ajna represent our conceptualizing neocortex, and they are connected to everything about us, like everything that we think about, that we've been, that's in us, that's around us, everything, like the interior, our internal and exterior, our environment basically around us. The whole basis of the mental identification is that the ajna center is biologically designed to be connected to be everything about you through the pituitary agency. And it brings this powerful biological illusion of being so deeply connected to your life at the mental plane that you think it is you who's spontaneously making your decisions in the real time moment. So basically, the biological potential of the pituitaries is to monitor and to influence everything that goes on in our physical lives. And they're instruments of control over the whole biological process of how we operate organically and internally and how we present ourselves externally. So it controls this, it's this master agency to control this moment by moment connection, this immediate connection to the life. So the mind's connection to the physical life is receptive and reactive. It's not actually creative. And before anyone could be aware consciously of anything, a chain of events have to happen from the brain to the muscles or from the muscles to the brain. And awareness is a physical result, but not a physical cause. But since the mind is so deeply connected to every part of you, it follows deeply what you feel, what you're identified with, and it thinks it's a creative force. And this is why the ajna is the dilemma for anybody who wants to wake up. And then our eyes are also part of this center. And our eyes deepen the whole dilemma, like the spleen, the splenic awareness, it can smell things, right? But the eyes, because of the source of the illusion, we can only see like a tiny bit of the light spectrum, and the entire illusion of the Maya is built on light. And this visual nature actually traps us for all the wonderful qualities that we see. But the eyes are actually very tricky. The way we perceive the world and give things names and attributes depend on what we take in through these eyes. There's two gates that are related to the eyes. The 17th gate is in the understanding circuit and it is related to the right eye, and the 11th gate in the sensing circuit is related to the left eye. But human eyes operate in a very restrictive wavelength. Like I said, we only see a very small percentage of the light spectrum. Now, radio waves, electromagnetic waves, and almost all of the wavelength information that exists in the universe is not visible to us. We only see the frequencies that we're biologically restricted to see. And the moment that you see that your capacity to see is limited, therefore you shall see that so is your conceptualization of the world. So we are developmentally and specially limited by the biological parameters of exactly which made us so distinctive in our capacity for a vision that was actually a step down as a frequency under pressure from the head to the ajna, to the throat, with the dropping of the larynx into sound from light. So we all see things differently as well, and when you look out into the world, everything gets stored like everything else. But when you go back to try to access that storage or access that memory, you don't really get to see the whole thing or experience the whole memory again because you don't store like one particular image or one particular piece of context or information. It's actually buried under a memory key. And to access the picture, you have to open up the memory. So if you try to reconstruct the memory of something you've seen rather than an objective image of the thing itself, there will be many elements that are missing. The thing to recognize is that taking in the world and then bringing it back out is not in the same way that you think it is. What you've seen is actually different from your memory because the information actually deteriorates as you log it. So you're limited to seeing through your memory in your own way. So the mind's not here to decide on a course of action. It's here to compare this and that to measure the Maya. And it's an organizing principle. You can look at things and wait it out and see through your own authority. Like you can absolutely use mind to measure, if you're emotional and you're measuring things out, don't just jump to it and say, okay, this one seems better, because it can be so distorted by these moment by moment conditioning factors that happen all the time, and so much that we actually can't see. So, and it's your openness as well. It's the spokesperson for your openness. So it definitely is not your authority. Even if you're defined, it's not your authority. If you're defined, you just have a very consistent way of conceptualizing things, naming things, researching. You have a fixed mind, right? And if you're connected to the throat, you have a way of communicating, actually communicating your mind. But then you can get into trouble with that as well because you're just speaking the mind, which isn't actually your body. It's not your true self. So you're not speaking really through your body. You're speaking through the mind, which is not you, no matter whether it's defined or not. I mean, I'm sure there are some people who can speak their mind that are awake and aware enough that it is able to run through their inner authority before they decide to speak. But in most cases, it can create a lot of trouble. So if you have an open ajna, the non-self is pretending to be mentally certain, and it amplifies mental certainty of the defined, and it distorts and it's inconsistent. And the potential wisdom for the open ajna is to know which mental concepts are actually of value. The undefined mind can process information through the openness, and this can be a great opportunity for wisdom as long as the mind is not being given any authority to direct your life. Mind is a sign of intellectual quality, and open minds, they keep filling up their minds with different libraries and collections of all different types of things. But it can also just give you more mental anxiety if you're undefined because it can never fix the mental process. Undefined minds are always taking in others and others' concepts and ideas of inspiration, thinking they're their own, thinking that they are their own all the time. But it's the defined mind who establishes the parameters and the various venues that we're supposed to take, whether logical or abstract or individual. But they are establishing the mechanism of how the mind makes decisions, and they have a fixed way of thinking and conceptualizing, and they always have access to this, while the undefined mind does not always have access to this. So if you are undefined, just let go of trying to always know everything or being mentally certain, because I don't have a defined ajna. So anyone I'm speaking to who's undefined, we don't have a consistent access to this. And it's a huge, huge distortion field. If you're undefined, the less certain you are, the more valuable you're going to be to the totality, because you're the one that has to judge the certainty of the defined. And this is the value and wisdom of any open center. Our difficulty waking up is all in the mind. The frequency given off by defined is the person is mentally certain, and if it's connected to the throat, it can speak consistently from the mind, and there's a certainty that arises out of the consistency. So now in the Ajna Center, as we're talking about, the 847, I'm talking specifically here about what the pressure, the anxiety, the fear is, right? So the gate 47, the gate of realizing, it puts a pressure to interpret and conceptualize past experiences. It's about creating a whole concept from abstract knowledge without using logic. Gate 47's mind is full of images, helping put the abstract pieces together from gate 64, which is its connection in the head center, into a bigger picture that leads to clarity. In the process of piecing together, the gate can become even more confused because of incomplete and imperfected memories, which can manifest as a pressure, and it can only be resolved with patience and continuous interpretation that eventually leads to an aha moment. So it could be constant fear or anxiety that nothing makes sense or everything is in vain. Oppression and trying to rationalize life experiences that may have oppressed you and trying to figure out all the time. It's the 4764, the channel of abstraction, a design of mental activity mixed with clarity. Okay, so then we move to the middle in the upper part of the ajna connecting to the head center. The gate 24, the gate of rationalizing, is all about thinking over and over, seeking to rationalize your thoughts. It's constantly selecting useful and potentially inspiring ideas for others. Gate 24, in combination with Gate 61's inspiration and push for exploring inner truth, can unleash highly creative energy that could bring forward mystical knowledge. Gate 24 shapes all of that inspiration coming from the 61 into a rational form, preparing to be put into words so that it can be shared with the rest. However, it needs clarity when rationalizing, otherwise it can get stuck in its own rationalizations and ruminations. So it can be anxiety and constant thoughts and fears about not being able to find the answers to the important questions in life. Fear of not finding your truth, fear of losing inspiration. And it's the channel of awareness, the 2461, design of a thinker. Okay, then we have gate 4. It pushes you towards wanting to find an answer to everything, regardless of its validity. It's the key aspect in the logic circuit and makes science possible by creating hypotheses. The gate of formalization is only responsible for asking questions, and when it, on its own, tries to find answers to those sometimes ridiculous hypotheses. Those answers could be far from valid, because the aspect of validation is located in other parts of the logic circuit. Gate 4 lacks the ability to validate. If the gate can't understand something, it will come up with a logical reason to reject it. My mom has this, and she literally, if I try to explain anything to her, human design or anything other that's logical, that's above her, she just comes up with a logical reason to reject it. Just because you have gate 4 or somebody has gate 4 doesn't mean that their formulas are always correct. Please understand that. Yeah, gate 4 combined with an open head center and an investigator profile, for example, will be under pressure to come up with an answer, sometimes immediately answering a question, often in a foolish or ridiculous way. It can be fear, anxiety of chaos and disorder. And you could experience restlessness and constant thoughts that you will never have order in your life. Constantly always trying to rationalize. And it's the 63-4, the channel of logic, design of mental ease mixed with doubt. Then we have the 17, the gate of opinions. So the gate of opinions first utilizes logic, then therefore the question and the hypothesis and then the opinions about the hypothesis. This gate is here to offer its opinions about what will work and what will not. Opinions are necessary to find the best and most logical solution, but they are not always welcome, and as they often feel personal by nature, this does not mean that they're actually correct. Gate 17 sees clearly in the now and knows how to project details into the future as patterns. It could be fear or anxiety or being afraid that your opinions will be challenged and that you will not be able to have the details to express it properly. It is part of the channel of acceptance, design of an organizational being, which is the 1762 from the Ajna to the throat. So that's more about communication rather than the Ajna to the head, which the other channels I just spoke about were more about the inspiration coming down into from the head to the Ajna. These are from the Ajna to the throat, so it's about the conceptualizing to actually speaking it. Okay. Then we have the gate 43, the gate of insight. This is the energy of taking knowledge and structuring it according to one's own insight and inner voice. It is a gate of deafness. It only knows what it's interested in, and it's not necessarily interested in what others know. Gate 43 wants to understand things by itself, which often happens by gaining insight seemingly out of nowhere. It's the gate of awareness and knowing. However, it has to wait to be recognized before sharing the insight with others. This is part of individual circuitry, the genius to freak channel of structuring, the 4323. And it is the fear that your insight will be strange to others or not be able to explain what you know. And I have the 23, not the 43, but the 23 in the throat part of this channel in my Mars, which is the Mars is all about energy that is still immature that needs to grow over time. So my assimilation is kind of what I'm practicing here. If I can assimilate speaking these different topics properly. So part of my experiment here, guys. And also I have the 17, which I spoke about the opinions, and that's in my design Mars. So a lot of conceptualizing kind of stuff going on here. Okay. Then we have all the way to the right on the bottom part of the ajna going to the throat, we have the 11, which goes to the 56 in the throat. So this is the 1156 design of a seeker, the channel of curiosity. And the gate of ideas brings together ideas in formation of a story. It represents sensory energy about abstract ideas and possibilities rather than logic. These ideas do not to be explicit, but are primarily intended to make others think. This is the sorting and the piecing of images to create the bigger picture of the story. This gate utilizes the visual memory from gate 47, and gate 11 creates the mental concepts that come from the sensing circuit. A literal and metaphorical fear of darkness could be what the fear anxiety here is. And again, that's part of the 1156, the design of a seeker or a searcher, channel of curiosity. All right, guys. Well, I just wanted to give a little bit of context about this awareness center, and I will go into the next awareness center, the solar plexus, next week. And if you guys have any questions, you don't understand anything that I'm saying here, because yeah, I am working with part of that 4323, that genius to freak channel, and trying to assimilate things in my immature Martian energy that is maturing over time. But yeah, the assimilating thing comes definitely genius to freak, even though I only have half of it. Thank you guys for tuning in, and if you have any questions, you have any of these gates in your chart, don't hesitate, reach out to me and we can talk about it. And yeah, and remember that there are so many pieces to this whole system, and that's why I'm doing it center by center in order. Like I'm doing the awareness centers, then the pressure centers, and then the other centers. And then I'll have to do the channels and the gates and assimilate all into different pieces so that you guys can understand all of the different pieces and then synthesize how it works in your individual body graph. All right, guys, have a good day. Bye.